Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the monthly Fire Safe Sonoma speaker series. My name is Ben Nichols, and I am your host for today's program. For those of you who may not know, Fire Safe Sonoma is the county-wide Fire Safe Council and has been serving Sonoma County proudly since 1997. We live stream this program at 2 o'clock on the fourth Thursday of every month, except for the month of December. You can find our past speaker series programs on our YouTube channel. We're in our sixth season, so there is a lot of good information out there to check out. Before we get started, I want to thank the Fire Safe Sonoma team for helping out today, and to our California Climate Action Corps fellows, Claire, Jennie, and Sydney, for presenting today. Don't forget to check your calendar. Check out our calendar on the Fire Safe Sonoma website for upcoming events and to stay in the loop. Subscribe to our updates so we can keep you informed. Feel free to share any events you may be promoting with us, and we'll get them on our events calendar to share with the greater county. And let us know what you would like to see us present in the upcoming year by completing the survey in the chat. Some upcoming events that we have. Last month, we had Ivan O'Neill from Madronas Wildfire Defense, who helped us review the recent changes to the Wildfire Prepared Home program and discussed which insurers are writing policies in wildfire risk areas. If you missed it, you can find the recording on our YouTube channel. Next month, we'll be joined by CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Marshall Turbeville, who will be reviewing the upcoming wildfire season and trends as we come into the peak of fire season. So mark your calendars. The expo this weekend, we have the Wildfire and Earthquake Expo. It's going to be put on at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds. We hope you will join us on Sunday, April 26th at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. If you haven't already heard, this is a free family-friendly event to help prepare our community for emergencies. And while supplies last, there will be free go bags for each family that attends. Next month is Wildfire Preparedness Month, and we have a lot planned. So please check out our Instagram for daily preparedness updates and best practices. We are also dropping by our local coffee shops to do pop-ups with our communities to share that information out in the community itself. We hope to see you out there and stop by and have a cup of coffee with us. With that, we'll get right into today's speaker series. So this month, we are pleased to have our very own fellows with us to discuss what they have learned over their time at Fire Safe Sonoma and after recently attending the Wildland Urban Interface Conference in Reno. They will dive into climate change affected fire and its impacts on public health and the environment. With that, I will turn it over to our crew.
Good afternoon. Before we talk a little bit about ourselves, I want to talk a little bit about California Climate Action Corps and how we work with Fire Safe Sonoma. California Climate Action Corps is a program for emerging climate leaders to pair with nonprofits, local governments, and other organizations that support climate change, particularly in food waste recovery, urban greening, and for us, wildfire resiliency. My name is Claire Burrow. I'm a wildfire resiliency fellow working with Fire Safe Sonoma. I mostly work on the communication side of things, so social media, newsletters, and event planning as well, if you were there for our Wildfire Leadership Mitigation Summit.
And then I'll go ahead and introduce myself before sharing our presentation in a second. My name is Sydney Maraca. I'm also a Wildfire Resiliency Fellow with CCAC. And I work more on the back end of things, but I love to show up to our tabling events and our weekend workday parties. So maybe you see me there, but I mostly do our GIS work. And I'm also managing the volunteers at the upcoming Wildfire and Earthquake Expo that Ben just talked about. So hopefully we will see you there this weekend.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jennie Hernandez. I'm also a Wildfire Resiliency Fellow with CCAC, partnered with Fire Safe Sonoma. Many of you have seen me at our community workday cleanup parties with the Firewise communities. I've been helping managing the tool trailer bookings, as well as assisting Marika, our Firewise coordinator, with emerging Firewise community members, with our action plan, and making sure that everything is getting all ready to go for submission.
All right, so with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. Oops. Sorry about that. Not the right button. Okay. All right. So today we are going to talk a little bit about the connection between climate change and wildfires, especially based on our personal experience at FireSafe Sonoma. And we'll go into kind of the natural role of fire in ecosystems compared to fire that's affected by climate change. And what that means for those of us who live in the wildland urban interface zones or the WUI, and things that we can expect environmentally and public health wise, as well as some best practices. Can you see the slide change?
Yes.
Okay.
To start, fire is a natural part of ecosystem regulation, especially in California. Healthy fire starts by burning the understory of a forest, managing vegetation overgrowth, and reducing stress on old growth trees. This opens up the forest floor to new growth post-fire regeneration. Many California native plant seeds are fire responsive, thriving in the space left after a natural fire. We also see an increase in wildlife after a fire, attracted by the increased biodiversity and space to move through the forest. This promotes habitat evolution over time. As the forest matures over years and years, the old growth dominates, which reduces sunlight that reaches the floor. The food sources have changed and there's less biodiversity. Then that's when you need the fire. The fire will burn through the understory and the old growth will remain, resetting the cycle. However, there are certain wildland areas where we prevent fire from occurring, and we have built communities and infrastructure in those areas. That's what we know as the WUI, or the wildland urban interface. And go on to the next slide. But before we get into how we've built in these kind of areas where fire is prevalent, especially in the era of the mega wildfires, we'll talk a little bit about the carbon cycle. In and of itself, the carbon cycle is a good thing. It's a natural cycle of carbon going from the atmosphere and being stored either in our land or in our oceans. During a fire in particular, there's a large release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from the combustion of organic materials. Over time, as new growth returns to the forest, the carbon is then stored in the physical structure of plants and added into the soil. This is referred to as a carbon sink. Carbon that has been stored in the soil for a long period of time is called a legacy carbon. Generally, as the forest matures, it can store more carbon. When the fire returns after a period of time, there's a release of that carbon into the atmosphere, and that's when the cycle will begin once again with the regeneration. The maintenance of this cycle is dependent on its fire interval, which is the period between natural fires, allowing the ecosystem time for proper regeneration.
So just like Claire introduced, fires, we have our fire intervals, which is the time between ecosystem regeneration and a fire. While each environment has their own fire interval that responds specifically to their own unique fire regime, which is basically just a combination of the type of vegetation in the ecosystem, the soil type, what type of wildlife lives there. We have seen a trend of these fire intervals decreasing over time in response to global warming. And overall, this creates an imbalance of carbon storage between the atmosphere and terrestrial sinks. And this graphic here on the slide, while it's not one of our local ecosystems in California, I think it does a really good job of depicting how fire intervals can affect carbon storage over time, especially when they are decreasing. So we have an example of the fire interval for the boreal forests in Saskatchewan. And these forests serve as a huge carbon sink throughout the Canadian Yukon. Their typical fire interval is about 100 years, which you can see in the graphic. But recently, it's been observed to be as short as 60 years, which is a 40% decrease. And this disrupts the legacy carbon, which is carbon stored deep in the soil, which can become especially vulnerable to shorter fire intervals because it has not had the time to be properly deposited deep into the ground. So when fire rushes through an immature forest, we see more carbon being released into the atmosphere than is being stored over time in the ground, creating that carbon imbalance between our atmospheric levels and our like terrestrial levels, what's stored in the vegetation. With this imbalance, our shortening fire intervals and increased fire frequency are contributing to the global temperature rise. The effects of climate change, mainly decreased snowpack and infrequent precipitation, are a recipe for ideal fire conditions. Ultimately, this leads to a prolonged fire season and an increased likelihood of high-intensity fires. And this system continues to intensify as a positive feedback loop, where the rising temperatures create better conditions for fires, which create more fires, and then we see it start over and over and over again, intensifying itself. So what does this mean for Californians? Well, California's ecosystems have a rich history of fire stewardship from Indigenous peoples. But now, post-colonization, we have developed one of the largest wildland urban interface zones in the US, where 1 out of 3 homes are in a WUI zone, and around 1.5 million new built homes in the last 30 years are also in the wildland for the WUI zone. So when you combine that with the recent intensification of climate change related wildfires, these areas have an especially high fire risk due to the climate change effects and the presence of urban infrastructure such as roads, power lines, the power plants that prevent proper land stewardship techniques, such as running prescribed fire or good fire. So that means that these small fires run the risk of becoming especially disastrous in these areas that have not been treated by fire in recent periods. The presence of fire suppression tactics over recent history has allowed vegetation to build up in our ecosystems. And this is not only unhealthy for our ecosystems, but creates a real fire risk, a real risk for fire escalation, where 1/3 of Californians live. So we want to take a moment to recognize some of the physical and maybe invisible effects of these fire escalations in our communities and on our landscapes as we talk about some of the very real impacts.
So on this slide, I am going to introduce the negative impacts from wildfires and how they're affecting in the WUI. So WUI fires can be more catastrophic because they involve combustion of materials from our homes, our cars, other man-made structures, compared to when we have a fire in the wildlands, which is mainly vegetational biomass that is combusting. In the WUI, we are getting a lot of different compound compositions, elemental particles from these chemicals that we have in our homes, in our schools, in our factories. And there are lingering effects that we see. Number one, contaminated smoke, contaminated water, and we're also having a loss of our homes and infrastructures, which is detrimental to the surrounding areas in the WUI and into our health. Next slide, please. So from the WUI conference, I was able to learn that smoke is the number one hazard during a fire and after a fire. So in a recent study from UC Davis from the 2020 and 2021 fires, smoke covered 70% of California, whether the fire was coming from Northern California or Southern California. And smoke can travel thousands of miles, which is disturbing human inundation, our wildlife, our water systems, and it could linger for weeks after a fire. This disrupts our agriculture, our local economies, and the general quality of life for people in the surrounding areas. Next slide, please. So we also seen severe chronic and acute health impacts to not only our wildland fires, but our structural fires, and many of them fight side by side amongst other first responders like EMS, EMTs, and our police force. So a lot of these health effects we're finding after their years of service. So first responders in the wildland and the wildland urban interface have faced severe risks from toxins, mixed up fuels, smoke that's been burning our vegetation, structures, vehicles, as well as extreme physical stress from having PPE and the extreme heat combining together. And key health impacts that we have seen are respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular disease, rare chronic cancers, chronic inflammation, resulting in detrimental effects later on in their lives or even on the fire line. So it's just as important to take care of yourself as it is your community when you're fighting these fires, especially from the effects of the fires and smoke exposure. The particles released during a fire can affect you through your skin, your eyes, if you're not properly cleaning yourself and your skin or changing your PPE regularly or making sure that you are wearing a mask or any type of respiratory protection. Um, whether you are on a intense wildland fire, a fire in the WUI, or even doing a pile burn, broadcast burn that's preventative work, it's still important to protect yourself and be mindful that any amount of smoke, regardless of how big a fire is affecting you and your health. Next slide, please. And this will bring it to Claire.
All right. So while devastating, what we know, while wildfires that kind of get out of control are devastating and have a lot of negative impacts on our communities, what good fire is a natural ecological reset that boosts soil fertility, clears dead undergrowth, and regenerates plant populations. It supports biodiversity by creating diverse habitats, kills diseases and pests that threaten trees, and reduces future catastrophic wildfires by consuming built-up fuel. A lot of the key positive effects for fire on ecosystems are, again, those soil fertility and regeneration. That ash from burned vegetation returns those nutrients to the soil, creating a nutrient-rich base for new life. The blackened earth also absorbs more sunlight, which promotes faster regeneration of native grasses, shrubs, and trees. Fire also clears thick undergrowth, allowing sunlight to reach the forest floor. Some species, such as lodgepole pine and giant sequoia, are serotineous, meaning that they depend on fire to melt the resin and release their seeds. Fire also clears dead, decaying matter that opens up forests that can create diverse habitats that benefit animals like elk, deer, and sheep, which often browse on fresh shoots that appear after a fire. Kind of setting that balance in of itself, if we have more habitats for more animals that are then clearing away that vegetation, it's kind of like that balance is being restored. Intense fires can also kill insects and diseases that plague trees, keeping the overall forest ecosystem healthier. And then most importantly is that good fire or intentionally set fires that are there to promote the natural cycle of the land and the natural carbon cycle. Those controlled and low intensity fires reduce the buildup of fuel that can lead to large, destructive, uncontrollable wildfires. And then finally, by removing heavy brush and reducing the number of plants absorbing water, fires can increase water flow in streams and watersheds. And you can go
So,
right ahead, Jennie.
oh yes, thank you, Claire. So, some prevention work that myself and the fellows have done, I would say a really great job at, is our defensible space invitational cleanup, education and community outreach, as well as learning new tips and tricks from land paths where we were pile building. So in this first picture, we were at our Firewise community wiki up in Larkfield in Santa Rosa area, where we were getting rid of scotch broom, which is highly flammable, and other vegetation that was encroaching the surrounding homes that were previously affected by the fire and unfortunately burned down in their community has done such a great job participating and cleaning up and educating themselves and doing the hard work. And in the next um, picture, you can see I'm right there making a pile burn at Land Pass. We learned efficient pile burning tips and tricks and safety, as well as mosaic burning and broadcast burning. And they offer these to the community, not just to first responders or people working in this work. And then recently, the fellows and I, along with Sophie, were at Earth Day doing some community and engagement and outreach. Just because in May it's Wildfire Preparedness Awareness Month doesn't mean that you have to wait for May. So if you see us around, please stop by.
And then I can take it from here. Perfect. A lot of people, when we do our community engagement, are kind of like, what are things that we can actually do? One of the main things that FireSafe Sonoma does is we engage with our Firewise communities, and we've built to over 40 Firewise communities in Sonoma County. Being a Firewise community means that there are certain standards that your community has to go through and invest certain things into fire prevention and home hardening and defensible space. And then you can prepare your area and your home by creating defensible space in whatever way that might look for you. I know for some renters, it might be completely different than someone who owns a big property. So feel free to visit our website for those kind of differences and tips on what you can do in both those situations. And definitely consider redesigning your landscape to being fire adaptive. Resilient Landscapes Coalition is a fantastic resource where different organizations, including FireSafe Sonoma, have kind of come together to suggest different ways that you can still keep your landscape beautiful while also being fire safe and promoting native plants as well. Knowing your zone is a big one. In the event of an emergency and a wildfire in your area, it's important to know your zone, to get those alerts from Watch Duty or SoCo alerts, and just generally having that in the back of your mind so that you're not scrambling last minute if there is an emergency. And then knowing when to burn. That's a really big one. A lot of people, I will say, are like, oh, I can just set fires in my yard. There are a lot of guidelines that you could find either through the CAL FIRE website or just kind of looking up what those protocols are. And yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. It's been fantastic. It's been a lot of learning for us. I, in particular, don't have a fire ecology background, so all of this has been very new to me since I've started at FireSafe Sonoma. And it's also been fantastic to connect with the Sonoma County community because I'm from Petaluma. So it's great to kind of be back and connect with everyone again.
Yeah, I would love to jump in on that. Thank you too. As someone who does not have a fire ecology background, this has been such a wonderful learning experience, and getting to go to the Wildland Urban Interface Conference, and also just connecting with all of Fire Safe Sonoma's resources, connecting with the community, just thinking about some of the past speaker series we've had on, good fire and regenerative forests. I think this all really ties together, is something that we found during our independent research, that these are all the best resources and the best practices.
And then I just wanted to share that I have learned so much what it's like living in a WUI. I'm from a small community in SoCal, and I had the privilege of serving a season as a wildland firefighter on Crew 52 for the Six Rivers National Forest while I was in college. So I was able to have some firsthand experience, and as well as my education as a natural resource major at Humboldt State. You can never learn enough, and this has really taught me what the community has done in Sonoma County since their catastrophic fires and what can be improved. And I'm just happy that I got to learn so much more.
And with that, I will stop sharing screen.
Well, thank you very much, ladies. I really appreciate all the great information that you brought to the group today. And with that, we'll close out our speaker series for the day. I just want to remind everybody that upcoming events we have, again, Battalion Chief Marshall Tuberville with CAL FIRE that will be reviewing our upcoming wildfire season and what our fuels and weather patterns are looking like as we head into peak fire season. So mark your calendars for that presentation. And we also have the Wildfire and Earthquake Expo at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds this weekend, Sunday, April 26th from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. And with that, everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you.